So what's up guys? Welcome back sa ating panibagong video. For anything else, nais ko po sana kayong i-dare na i-click yung subscribe button at i-ring yung notification bell para lagi kayong updated sa aming darating na video. Disclaimer lang po, I am not a teacher nor involved at any certain organization. I'm just a student who am responsibly doing a project. The information contained in this YouTube channel and resources available for download, viewing for educational and informational purposes only. No copyright infringement intended. P.S. This video presentation is not a sponsor.
Okay.
So our topic for today's episode would be risk reduction of climate change. Our agenda would be topic 1, understanding risk reduction of climate change. Topic 2, cause of climate change, impacts, effects of climate change. Topic 3, as a student, youth, what can we do about climate change? Climate change is definitely upon us. You don't need to have scientific mind to realize this. As the recent natural calamities have shown in the Philippines, which also sweep through some parts of Southeast Asia, causing hundreds of casualties and losses to the economy. Typhoon Sunjoy and Piping in 2009 that flooded Metro Manila, Sindong in 2011, which was recognized as the world's deadliest storm in 2011, and Pablo in 2012. Certainly, this is a little discomforting and makes us a little bit apprehensive about our future. To lessen our anxiety about this phenomenon, it helps to ask questions and get answers. It's also good to know if something is being done to address the problem, and to know that it's being done right.
It is the concept and practice of reducing disaster risks through systematic efforts to analyze and reduce the causal factors of disasters. Intend to reduce the exposure to hazards, lessening vulnerability of people and property, wise management of land and the environment, and improving preparedness for adverse events are all examples of disaster risk reduction. It includes disciplines like disaster management, disaster mitigation and disaster preparedness, but DRR is also part of sustainable development. In order for development activities to be sustainable, they must also reduce disaster risk. On the other hand, unsound development policies will increase disaster risk and disaster losses. Thus, DRR involves every part of society, every part of government, and every part of the professional and private sector. Defining climate change for most people, the expression climate change means the alteration of the world's climate that we humans are causing, through fossil fuel burning, clearing forests and other practices that increase the concentration of greenhouse gases, GHG, in the atmosphere. This is in line with the official definition by the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change that climate change is the change that can be attributed directly or indirectly to human activity that alters the composition of the global atmosphere and which is in addition to natural climate variability observed over comparable time periods. However, scientists often use the term for any change in the climate, whether arising naturally or from human causes. In particular, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, IPCC, defines climate change as a change in the state of the climate that can be identified by changes in the mean or the variability of its properties, and that persists for an extended period, typically decades or longer. Each of these two definitions is relevant and important to keep in mind. According to NASA, climate change describes a change in the average such as temperature and rainfall in a region over a long period of time. For example, 20,000 years ago much of the United States was covered in glaciers. In the US today, we have a warmer climate and fewer glaciers. Global climate change refers to the average long term over the entire Earth. Earth climate has constantly been changing even long before humans came into the picture. However, scientists have observed unusual changes recently. For example, Earth average temperature has been increasing much more quickly than they would expect over the past 150 years. This include warming temperature and changes in precipitation, as well as the effects of Earth's warming, such as rising sea levels, shrinking mountain glaciers, ice melting at a faster rate than usual in Greenland, Antarctica and the Arctic. Change in flower and plant blooming times. Causes of climate change. Is it caused by human activities? Let's find out. Scientists know that recent climate change is largely caused by human activities from an understanding of basic physics, comparing observation with models, and fingerprinting the detailed patterns of climate change caused by different human and natural influences. Since the mid-1800s, scientists have known that CO2 is one of the main greenhouse gases of importance to Earth's energy balance. Direct measurements of CO2 in the atmosphere and the air trapped in ice show that atmospheric CO2 increased by more than 40% from 1800s to 2019s. Measurements of different forms of carbon reveal that this increase is due to human activities. Other greenhouse gases, notably methane and nitrous oxide, are also increasing as a consequence of human activities. The observed global temperature rise since 1900s is consistent with detailed calculations of the impacts of the observed increase in atmospheric greenhouse gases, and other human-induced changes, on Earth's energy balance. Different influence on climate have different signatures in climate records. These unique fingerprints are easier to see by probing beyond a single number, such as the average temperature of Earth's surface, and by looking instead at the geographical and seasonal patterns of climate change. The observed patterns of surface warming, temperature changes through the atmosphere, increase in ocean heat content, increase in atmospheric moisture, sea levels rise, and increased melting of land and sea ice also match the patterns scientists expect to see due to human activities. The expected changes in climate are based on our understanding of how greenhouse gases trap heat. Both this fundamental understanding of the physics of greenhouse gases and pattern-based fingerprint studies show that natural causes alone are inadequate to explain the recent observed changes in climate. Natural causes include variations in the sun's output and in Earth's orbit around the sun, volcanic eruptions, and internal fluctuations in the climate system, such as El Niño and La Niña. Calculations using climate models have been used to simulate what would have happened to global temperatures if only natural factors were influencing the climate system. These simulations yield little surface warming, or even a slight cooling, over the 20th century and into 21st. Only when models include human influences on the composition of the atmosphere are the resulting temperature changes consistent with observed changes. Impact of climate change. Number 1. Ability. Climate change will reduce agricultural production, through environmental degradation, changing agroecological conditions and shifting growing seasons. Changes in rainfall and higher temperatures will also affect crop productivity, reducing food availability. Impact of climate change exceeds. Number 2. Food size will increase as a result of reduced production, reducing access to food. For the most vulnerable, reduced agricultural production will also mean lower income under these conditions, The protest who already used most of their incomes on food, will have to sacrifice additional income to meet their nutritional requirements. Impact of climate change: utilization and nutrition. Number 3. Climate change is expected to increase the incidence of diseases, therefore affecting utilization of food, particularly among children. Moreover, reducing agricultural production means that the most vulnerable households will have less food available, increasing the risk of malnutrition. Impact of climate change: stability. Number 4. Extreme weather events disrupt the stability of food production and access as well as people's livelihoods. The impacts of climate change will be distributed differently among different regions, generations, age classes, occupations, income groups and genders. Study shows that women represent 70% of the poor throughout the world, and the effects of climate change will fall disproportionately upon this social category. Most of the key areas of the negative consequences of climate change are therefore strongly connected to gender equality issues. The vulnerability of men and women to climate change and food insecurity is not the same. Men and women play different roles in household livelihoods, therefore they experience the impacts of climate change differently. Furthermore, men and women have differing abilities to respond to the threat that climate change poses to their lives and livelihoods. As a result, it is often women who are at a disadvantage when it comes to CCA climate change adaptation, increasing their vulnerability to food insecurity. For instance, in Karamoja, women are often acknowledged as owners of crops, but not land. The role of women in ensuring household food security and their dependence upon climate-sensitive activities and natural resources to do this reinforces their vulnerability to climate-related disasters. Additionally, the uncertainty of the tenure of land by women results in lower investment and environmental degradation, compromising future production potential and increasing food insecurity. Women also often lack access to adequate and timely climate information and other inputs, which has implications for agricultural productivity. A reduction in agricultural production reduces women's potential income, and the availability of food for household consumption, resulting in undernutrition. Effective, equitable adaptation therefore requires an understanding of the dynamics of vulnerability and the influence of gender upon these dynamics. One. Become informed. Climate change is a complicated topic. Your school can become informed by requesting a presentation hosting the youth conference on climate change. 2. Create an eco-group. There is strength in numbers. Find a group of like-minded students and teachers, and start talking. 3. Calculate your school's carbon footprint. By calculating your school's footprint, you can see how your school can make improvements, what the most bang for your buck might be, and get a sense of your baseline emissions. 4. Tackle consumerism. Youth have a large influence on consumption. This is an area that hits home for many students. Youth can influence the car their parent buys and dictate a family's wants and needs. To get students thinking about what they buy, set up a swap day at your school, create a sharing library for items that students don't use every day, or organize an eco-fashion fundraiser. Reduce waste. Solid waste reduction and recycling help address climate change. How? Manufacturing, transporting, and using the product, as well as management of the resulting waste, all generate greenhouse gas emissions. Waste prevention and recycling both reduce greenhouse gases associated with these activities by reducing methane emissions, saving energy, and increasing forest carbon sequestration. Usually schools address recycling first, more bins, additional, better signs, and education. Then schools think about composting, purchasing policies, litterless lunches, eliminating bottled water, becoming paper-free, participating in Waste Reduction Week. Make transportation a priority. The transportation sector is the greatest source of greenhouse gas emissions. To make a real dent in school carbon emissions, you need to reduce transportation emissions. The goal is to make sustainable transportation decisions easy. Work on getting more students and staff to walk, bike, bus, or carpool. If really be interested, the school can coordinate on the LGUs and implement an active and safe routes to school program.